Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome back, of course, to the channel. Haven't been streaming for, the last week and a half or so, of course, since the last Grand Prix in Monaco. But here we are for a new Grand Prix, Race 8 on the calendar. The Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku returns for another year. And, well, based on what we saw last year and at previous races here in Baku, I think the chances of an exciting weekend in Baku are pretty high. Hopefully you guys, by the way, are doing well. Hopefully having a good month of June so far, and hopefully no matter what time it is in your part of the world, where you're from, hopefully having the best day possible you can be having, given whatever circumstances you are, going through. But yeah, hopefully you are as excited as me for this weekend's Grand Prix, because I just don't, I don't believe this is going to be a Grand Prix that is going to be pretty straightforward. Never tends to be that way in Baku. I mean, even in the races here that haven't been as exciting as other years, we've had a couple surprises in there. So I think we're going to have definitely a very exciting Grand Prix weekend. Certainly throughout all parts of the field. I don't think it's going to be a situation where it's going to be easy to predict who is going to finish where. I think the entire field is going to be pretty hard to predict who's going to be where for the weekend, which is obviously good and is what we want. So yeah, should be a good weekend. And of course, tonight in this preview, what I'm going to be doing is going through all the teams, talking about how they are now coming into this Grand Prix after what happened, of course, in the last Grand Prix in Monaco, previewing how I think they'll do and what they need to do this weekend. Certainly other teams from a championship perspective have to get certain results, and I'll get into what they respectively all need to do. And like I said, I'll get into also how I think they'll all get on, which I'm sure will be proven wrong after Friday practice. But yeah, we'll also get into some stats through the night, couple bits of news. Also look at the track layout, just to remind people, of course, obviously, what the track looks like for anyone who is watching who is new. And also, we'll probably go back to it a couple times to illustrate why certain teams will be good this weekend and why certain teams will not be so good. But firstly, before we get into the teams, let's go on to the championship standings coming into this weekend's Grand Prix. So, in the driver's standings, Max Verstappen is in the lead by 9 points from Charles Leclerc in second. Of course, Leclerc was leading the Drivers' Championship for the first 5 races in the Formula 1 season, but the lead was took away from him in Spain. Sergio Perez is now third and is definitely now in the championship fight. He's only 15 points off the lead. And then you've got Russell in fourth for Mercedes, Carlos Sainz in fifth, Lewis Hamilton sixth, and then Norris 7th, Bottas 8th, Ocon 9th, and Kevin Magnussen still somehow is sat in the top 10 of the championship, even though he's not scored any points since Imola, which was, 6 weeks ago, I'm pretty sure. And, oh no, not that yet. We can now come to the constructors' standings. Red Bull are comfortably at the moment in the lead of the Constructors' Championship by 36 points. Ferrari definitely need some big results if they're going to respond in this championship. Mercedes comfortably in third. Look as though they're pretty much now nailed on to finish in third place. I don't see them really getting any higher than that, and definitely not falling any lower than that. McLaren just about in fourth place ahead of Alfa Romeo and Alpine, who are still hot on their heels, but McLaren's result last Grand Prix in Monaco definitely helped their points compared to Alfa Romeo and Alpine, who are very close in 5th and 6th. I do think, by the way, that McLaren, Alfa Romeo, Alpine will be one of the big fights in the championship this year for 4th place. I do expect Alfa Romeo and Alpine to get closer to McLaren as the season goes on. Alpha Tauri are in 7th, Haas 8th, Aston Martin 9th, and Williams in 10th. So those are the championship standings coming into this Grand Prix weekend. Now let's go to this, which is of course what you just saw a moment ago, and it is the track layout. So of course, for anyone who's been an F1 fan for a few years at least, of course you know what the Baku track looks like in terms of layout. But if you are new, then obviously I'll go through it. So from the turn 16, which you can see on the left-hand side, from that corner until turn 1, it is completely flat out, which is why in the past here we have seen teams who haven't necessarily had that great of a car aerodynamically, but have had a very fast car in a straight line, have done very well here in the past, because it is a very long stretch of circuit to be going flat out for. But yeah, you come down from a massive speed, down that straight into turn 1, and you go, the speed in terms of what it goes to from, 300 and whatever kilometers an hour all the way down to less than 100 miles an hour into turn 1. It is an immense drop off in speed into turn 1, and braking for turn 1 is very, very important. We're going to see it tomorrow and in the weekend, but braking for turn 1 is one of the most hardest things at this track because of the enormous speed you're coming at turn 1 from, of course, a very flat out section to end the previous lap and start the next one. So braking for turn 1, very difficult. Then if you get that right, you go into turn 2, which is a simple 90-degree left-hander. We do see lockups though into turn 2, and people going down that escape road. That's something else to look out for this weekend. And then you have your second DRS straight, which is between turn 2 and turn 3. Very similar to the straight we saw in Miami, the final DRS straight on that track, just a dead straight to a pretty simple braking zone of turn 3, which of course is another braking zone which is pretty difficult because you are coming into turn 3 at such a speed, and getting it slowed down in time on a track surface that isn't that grippy is pretty hard. And we did see last year cars going down that escape road, especially in qualifying, and having accidents in the exit barrier of turn 3. And then turn 4 is simple enough as long as there's no wind. Nico Hülkenberg found out in 2018 that if there's a bit of a wind blowing, that it can push the car into the wall on the exit of turn 4. And then turn 5 and 6, it's kind of, turn 5's a slow, it gets slower and slower as a corner, but it's not a proper slow corner, because as you enter turn 5, you are approaching at a bit of speed. Turn 6 is just a 90-degree right-hander. Then it's a short straight to turn 7, which is a very, very slow and pedestrian turn 7. And then you go into the castle section of turn 8, 9, 10, 11, which of course has seen many victims over the years. Charles Leclerc, of course, in 2019, put it in the barriers there in Q2 in 2019 and cost himself what probably was going to be pole position. And then you have a 90-degree left of turn 12, which takes you onto a bit of a flat-out section through a couple kinks of 13 and 14 down to turn 15. You can see on the top left there, which is a tricky braking zone again because you're coming at turn 15 from such a speed. And again, the track surface in terms of grip is not that great, and it's very easy to lock up going into turn 15. It's a corner that you do have to brake as late as you can for, of course, obviously, to get the time out of your lap. But if you get that right, then you head down to turn 16, which is a simple-ish corner, as long as you don't run too wide on the exit and straddle the curb and, possibly spin off that curb as well. Then, like I said before, from turn 16 all the way to the start-finish straight, it is flat out. Couple kinks of turn 17, 18, 19, and 20, but it is absolutely flat out. And I'm sure we will see a lot of racing and overtaking this weekend, because from turn 16 to turn 1, it is absolutely flat out. And we've seen plenty of overtaking here in the past with cars that can't follow as well. But this circuit is not necessarily going to suit all types of cars. It will suit definitely cars that have good straight line speed, such as Red Bull. To a degree, the Mercedes Works car does have some good straight line speed, certainly compared to what it used to be with the upgrade they brought a few races ago in Miami. Also, teams like Alpha Tauri, who have good straight line speed, that should help their performance this weekend. But also, slow speed corner or slow corner performance is going to be very important this weekend, as it is in Baku normally. So teams like Mercedes, for example, will struggle a bit in those slow speed corners, because we know from Monaco and the Spanish Grand Prix, they were very weak compared to how they were doing in the fast or the high speed corners and the straights. So yeah, slow speed corners, very important. Ferrari, definitely a team that is very good in slow speed corners. But like I said, a team like Mercedes, not so good. Red Bull are okay. They're not amazing or great, but they're certainly not the best team, I would say, in the slower corners. But you don't really, in Baku, have high-speed corners. It's really just either flat out or slow-speed corners. There's no real fast corners unless you count, turn 13, 14, but they're flat out. You don't have to, tamper with the throttle pedal through those corners or anything. So, yeah, teams that, do have good high-speed corner performance, it's not going to be the best track in the world for them if they're struggling a bit in the slow-speed corners. But that is the Baku circuit. But let's now go on to the teams. And, of course, we will start with the Scuderia Ferrari team. Of course, they are not leading any of the championships, which is hugely disappointing, considering that after the Australian Grand Prix about 6-7 weeks ago, even 8 weeks ago, I think almost it was, they looked as though they were going to be leading the championships at least for a while in this season, for another 2 or 3 months after, now. I don't think really that many people thought it would turn around that quickly by the time we got to the Monaco Grand Prix, that they would be, not in the lead of the Drivers' or Constructors' Championship. But quite simply, since that Grand Prix, they have just not executed at all the results that they should have got in the Grand Prix since. And really, it's been typical Ferrari since the Australian Grand Prix. Obviously, in Monaco, it was the most typical Ferrari performance. Somehow bottling a 1-2 in Monaco, which I just don't understand how you could possibly do that as a professional racing team. Get it that wrong that you still can't win a Monaco Grand Prix, even though you look out the front row. I just don't understand how you can possibly do that if you are a team like Ferrari. But yeah, coming into this Grand Prix, definitely morale is down, heads are down, because they've come off the back of, the last 2 races, which have not just been massively disappointing for the team, but they've been 2 races that they would have won on pace. They had the pace to win both races. I mean, the Spanish Grand Prix, they were going to win it easily, and then obviously their car, the engine just failed, and then obviously it was their own fault on the strategy as to why they didn't win not in Baku, in Monaco. But to blow 2, I think what were going to be pretty comfortable race wins, to blow 2 of them in a row in the space of a week is pretty bad for any team, not just for the Ferrari team. So yeah, coming into this Grand Prix, not looking great. In terms of how their car will perform this weekend, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll be competitive, certainly with Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc historically is very, very quick in Baku. He had pole position, of course, at last year's Grand Prix, even though Ferrari weren't even that quick last year at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. He still somehow got pole position in what was an incredible effort from him. In other years as well, he's been super quick in Baku. Of course, he finished 6th for Sauber here in 2018. So he's always been good here. Also, I think in was it Baku in 2017, he won here as well, and I think that was just after his father's passing, was it, with Leclerc? So it's a tremendously strong circuit for him. It's mostly been success for him around this track. The only year really where I would say he failed, I guess you could say, was probably 2019, where of course he put it in the barriers in qualifying at the Castle section, and then only came home to finish in 5th because he'd given himself too much work to do from was it 8th or 9th on the grid. So yeah, I expect Charles Leclerc this weekend to be very competitive. I think in qualifying, I would not be surprised whatsoever if he was on pole. But I just think for the race, it's going to be very difficult for them because it's still not certain that Ferrari have sorted out their tyre issues on race day that we saw back in Miami and in Imola, where certainly towards the end of a stint, Ferrari were wearing their tyres out a bit more than Red Bull were. And also, of course, if Red Bull can stick close to Ferrari, if they are ahead of them on track, the Red Bulls will have a massive straight line speed advantage over the Ferrari team. Of course, down that massively long pit straight, which is going to make a lot of difference. So, and you know, with these cars following better, especially around Baku, it's going to make a massive difference. So, it's not going to be, even if they do get pole with Leclerc, it's not going to be a simple Grand Prix weekend. It really, really is not. If they're going to win this race, it's going to have to be them fighting tooth and nail to get it, because Red Bull are going to be pretty competitive themselves. Maybe not, you know, the quickest team, Red Bull, in qualifying, but certainly in the race, I think Red Bull are going to be very hard to stop for the Ferrari team. And honestly, given how Ferrari are and given how they've performed so far this season, certainly in the last 3 or 4 races, I would be surprised if Ferrari would beat Red Bull in this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix if the pace is what I expect it to be between the two teams in qualifying and race trim. So, yeah. We'll see what happens. They've definitely got a great chance of victory. I'm not going to, come into this saying, well, after what we've seen, yeah, they're absolutely finished, because they're not. They still have a very, very good car. But, yeah, getting the win on Sunday, that is going to be a very hard thing to do. Very, very hard, especially with Red Bull's straight line speed. And also, of course, the man who won last Grand Prix out in Monaco, Sergio Perez, this is one of his best tracks, so if not his best track in F1. So, yeah, going to be a very, very difficult race weekend. Ferrari, though, they do need to win at least one of the next 2 races. I mean, do I think they will? No, I don't think they will win one of the next 2 races, but they have to. If they want to win the championship, they've got to win at least one of these next 2 races, preferably this one, to halt the momentum that Red Bull have had since Imola. They need to halt it as soon as possible. So preferably, they need to win this weekend rather than next weekend. Of course, if they were to win next weekend as well, that'd be fantastic. But Ferrari have got to win this weekend. As simple as that. If they lose again this weekend, and then they do in Canada, then, that'll be then 6 races in a row they haven't won, and they're supposedly in a championship battle. You can't win a championship if you go that many races without winning a race. It just doesn't happen. I mean, look last season, for example, at the Red Bull Mercedes fight. I mean, Mercedes were in the championship fight, of course, with Red Bull, but a big reason why Red Bull were able to just about hang on in the end when Mercedes put on their late spurt to win the Drivers' Championship. A big reason why they were able to hang on with Max Verstappen is because they had runs of races in the summer part of the season where they were able to, to get the victory over Mercedes, for like 4 or 5 races in a row. So they've got to make sure, Ferrari, that they don't let Red Bull continue to win race after race after race, because I mean, this weekend they should have a competitive car, especially with those slow speed corners. But, Montreal, not going to be... I definitely don't think they'll be the most competitive team that weekend. And then certainly when we get to Silverstone and the Red Bull Ring in Austria, they are going to be on the back foot there as well, unless they bring some upgrade that can reverse that, that expectation that they're not going to be that competitive. So... yeah, big weekend for Ferrari. To be honest, from the championship perspective, I hope they do win this weekend. I mean, obviously, I have nothing against Red Bull, I have nothing against anyone, but like I said, from a championship perspective, if we're going to have a title fight to the end of the season, Ferrari have got to win one of the next 2 races. So hopefully Ferrari do win this weekend to to avoid Red Bull just relentlessly pulling away, which at the minute I have to say looks as though is going to be the case. But here are some stats regarding the Ferrari team. They need to win this weekend, but their history in Baku is not good. They have never won a race in Baku. Charles Leclerc does have a pole position in Baku from last year. In the race, though, he was eaten up very easily by the by the 2 Red Bulls and the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. And Ferrari, since 2016, which of course was the first F1 race in Baku, only have 3 podium finishes, which might not sound that bad, but when you consider that in 2017, 2018, 2019, they had a car that really was competitive to win races or at least be on the podium, that's not that great. 2017, they had no cars on the podium when really they should have been winning that race after what happened to Lewis Hamilton with the headrest. And then obviously 2018, Ferrari had pole position that year with Sebastian Vettel and ended up throwing that away. So it's not been a great Grand Prix for the Ferrari team. They've always had a lot of potential for this race, but most of the time, if not all of the time, they have just completely thrown it away. Definitely threw away victory in 2018 and 2017. And maybe you could say the same for 2019, where Leclerc put it in the barriers in qualifying. So, yeah, history for them in Baku is not good. But now let's move on to the Red Bull team, who, of course, since Imola, like I said, they have been going very, very well. This man on screen is definitely having one of the best performances out of any driver this season. What a victory it was in Monaco, out qualifying and out racing Max Verstappen on merit. He beat him fair and square and was definitely the driver of the weekend in Monaco. And yeah, thoroughly deserved the victory he got. Partied very hard after the race in Monaco. A bit too hard because he had to apologise to his wife for, I think, dancing face to face with a mystery woman. But if you saw a couple clips from the after race celebrations, he was absolutely hammered. You could tell he was practically unable to walk, which I don't blame him because, not everyone gets to win the Monaco Grand Prix. So I don't blame him at all for doing that. But yeah, did have to apologise for that, which I'm sure did not go down too well at home. But he comes into this race full of confidence, and so did the Red Bull team. And I think for this weekend, for qualifying, they're definitely going to be very competitive for pole position. It's going to be a fight, really, I think, between Leclerc, Perez, and Verstappen for pole. Carlos Sainz, maybe, but most likely not, because I still don't think Carlos can really be as quick at the moment as his teammate Leclerc. But also, I forgot to mention this with Carlos Sainz, but he hasn't been that great in Baku here in the past. He's not been terrible. He's had a couple decent results considering the cars he's driven, but it's not been anything stellar or a massive standout from the rest of the pack. So, yeah, most likely the battle for pole position will be between Leclerc, Perez, and Verstappen. Sergio Perez, I think, is going to be very competitive this weekend. If he doesn't win the race, he will be very close to winning the race. That's how competitive I think he'll be this weekend. Because obviously the Red Bull car will be quick, but he is very, very good here in Baku. For Max Verstappen, though, he's not really had great history in Baku as Max Verstappen, as we'll get onto in a moment. But yeah, it's not really been the greatest Grand Prix for him. Has never had a podium even at a race in Baku, which again I'll get onto some of the stats regarding Max and Checo and their performances around the Baku street circuit. But yeah, this has never really been a great track for Max. Never really had great performance either. I think 2016 here he was quite a bit off the pace of his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, who I think was on the front row for that first race in Baku. And then I think even 2018 he was out-qualified by Ricciardo. And of course in that same race he ended up having a crash with Ricciardo. his teammates. So yeah, it's just not been a good Grand Prix this film. And obviously last year was leading it, was going to win it, but then his tyre blew and he ended up scoring absolutely nothing. So yeah, this has probably been one of his 2 or 3 worst circuits, I would say, on the calendar. So if Max Verstappen is not going to win this weekend, honestly, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a surprise. Because like I said, he's never been on the podium here, so it's not like he's expected absolutely to be, first, at worst second, like he has been at times this season, or most of the season so far. I mean, I still expect him to be at the absolute worst in third, but, I don't expect him to be I don't think he's the favourite to win this weekend, and I certainly don't think he is going to be, if he does win this race, I don't think it's going to be a comfortable race win if he does get it. I think it's going to be one he'll have to absolutely fight for all weekend long against his teammate and Charles Leclerc as well. But for qualifying, I think Ferrari will, with Leclerc, have the edge. But when it comes to the race, I think Red Bull should have the best race car. Straight line speed is the best out of any other team, and also their tyre wear is pretty good on the Red Bull car. Tyre wear is in Baku is important to a certain degree. Certainly, if you start the race on, say, soft tyres, it's going to be very, very important. So I would, if I was going to put any, money on a team to win this weekend, it would definitely be Red Bull. Would I put my money on this man, Sergio Perez? Not sure. I mean, I think he'll be very strong this weekend, but, we did see last year he was very strong here, and Verstappen was still, ahead of him on track and was going to win that Grand Prix. It was actually going to be a Red Bull 1-2 last year until Verstappen's tyre blew. So, yeah, Red Bull definitely, compared to Ferrari, definitely have a better history around Baku. Here are the stats. Red Bull, since 2016, the first race in Baku for F1, have 2 race wins in Baku. 2017, of course, they won with Daniel Ricciardo in a crazy race in Baku. And last year in 2021, Sergio Perez won. And that was actually Sergio Perez's first win for the Red Bull team, which was pretty much exactly a year ago, or just over a year ago now, Sergio Perez. And yeah, for Max Verstappen, he has never won a race or finished on the podium in Azerbaijan. So if you are a Max Verstappen fan, just don't expect him to be as competitive here as he would be at, say, the Red Bull Ring or, anywhere like that, because it's not historically a great place for him. But for this man, it certainly is. Sergio Perez, of course, he won last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And also, he has 4 top 6 finishes in the 5 races here in Baku, with 3 of them being podiums. And you have to remember that only last year's Grand Prix, where he won, that was the only race he's done here in Baku where he was in a car that was a front-running car. All those other races, he was in a midfield car and was, 3rd in 2016, actually qualified 2nd in that race as well for that race weekend, but had a grid penalty. So he could have probably finished in 2nd for that Grand Prix had he not had the penalty. And then 2017, I think he retired from the race because he had contact with his teammate Ocon. Could have possibly won that race as well had Ocon not done that, because what happened, to Hamilton and Vettel later on could have allowed for a 1-2 finish for the Force India team at the time, and maybe Perez would have won that race as well. And then 2018, he finished 3rd and qualified, I think, 8th for that Grand Prix. 2019 for Racing Point, in a Racing Point car that year that was not that great. It wasn't, well, at that part of the season, you could argue it was particularly bad compared to what he went on to be later that season and obviously into 2020. But, finished 6th in the race in 2019. Very, very impressive result for Sergio. And then, of course, last year, he qualified, was it 5th or 6th, something like that. And then he came through and got up to 2nd, was heading for a Red Bull 1-2. Then, of course, Verstappen had his issue. Hamilton locked up on the restart. And then Sergio Perez won the Grand Prix. So, in terms of the fight for the front, Leclerc and Perez are probably the two best drivers for this circuit out of anyone else. So maybe that will be the main fight this weekend for glory. But yeah, Sergio Perez, definitely watch out for him this weekend. Would not be surprised whatsoever if Sergio won again in Baku. Now, we'll move on to Mercedes, who did not have that great of a Grand Prix in Monaco. Definitely was not as good as they expected it to be. Well, coming into the Monaco Grand Prix, I didn't think they came in with unrealistic expectations, or that they thought it was going to be like a possible win or another podium or anything, but I think they definitely thought it wouldn't be a 5th place and an 8th place finish, which is more like what they were getting before their big upgrade that they brought in Barcelona, which definitely helped their performance in the certainly the high-speed corners. So yeah, Mercedes off the back of a not great result, and unfortunately I think this weekend is going to be a continuation of that. I mean, their straight line speed, like we've seen since Miami, because of the upgrade that they brought to the Miami Grand Prix, which trimmed off quite a bit of downforce and obviously trimmed off some drag, which was a very important thing for them, because their car in a straight line was just way too slow, like we saw especially at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix at Imola. Yes, since then they've been pretty quick in the speed traps, and definitely in Barcelona were very quick in the speed traps there. So towards the end of the lap, obviously Sector 3 is just flat out. There is no braking required in Sector 3. So in that sector, Mercedes, as long as they've got some sort of tow from a car ahead, should be pretty competitive. But in Sector 1, they'll probably be losing, what, a 10th or 2 to the front two teams. And then Sector 2 is really where they'll, the middle sectors, that's probably where they're going to be losing the big chunk of time, because it's full of slow corners. And we saw in Barcelona and Monaco that Mercedes in the slow corners are going to be pretty, or are pretty bad at the moment. It's really what is causing them, despite that upgrade they brought in Barcelona, which definitely improved their performance, it's what's causing them at the minute to still be lagging quite a bit behind the top two teams. So yeah, I think Mercedes are going to still be just a few tenths of a second away from fighting for victory. I think they could, if it's a bit of a unusual, crazy race here in Baku, which we can get. We've had it, 3 out of the 5 races here in Baku that we've had so far for Formula One. We have had some crazy races and some surprises in terms of midfield. Well, I guess you could say midfield drivers, midfield teams, certainly finishing on the podium. So, Mercedes could get a podium this weekend, but it would have to depend on something happening for one of the Ferraris and Red Bulls, and there being a bit of a get-together maybe on track between one of the Ferraris and Red Bulls, or the teammates, or whatever you want to call it. Most likely, with Mercedes, I would expect them to be 3rd row of the grid at best. Saying that, though, I think that's going to be pretty difficult for them to get, because I expect Alfa Romeo, definitely with Valtteri Bottas, to be a lot more competitive this weekend. And also Alpine, I think, will be very competitive this weekend, as we'll get onto later on, and I'll get onto my reasons why I think they'll be pretty competitive. So, yeah, for Mercedes, and if you are a Mercedes fan, don't expect a whole lot. If they can finish 5th and 6th in qualifying and the race, as long as the top 4 finish, in the top 4 where they should finish, then I think that would be realistically the best result they can get. I just don't think they can really compete with those teams. I don't really see Mercedes competing for podiums or wins until the British Grand Prix, which is in, 3 weeks from now, or 3.5 weeks from now, where they are bringing, I'm pretty sure, an upgrade, the final proper upgrade for the season. And because of their high-speed corner performance, they are expecting to be right there with Ferrari and Red Bull, which I would definitely expect given what we've seen so far with their, again, high-speed corner performance. So, yeah, if you're a Mercedes fan, don't expect, this team to be competitive with Ferrari and Red Bull really until the British Grand Prix, but in the next two races, Baku and Montreal, where we know we can get some unusual results, if they can just stay out of trouble, then they could still get a podium or here or there. We'll see what happens. But they do actually, Mercedes, have very good history around Baku and are actually, since the race or the racing began here in 2016, Mercedes are the most successful team around Baku. As we can see here, Mercedes, as it says there, most successful team in F1 races in Baku, with the most wins in Baku being 3. Rosberg got the first one in 2016, and then it was Hamilton in 2018 and Bottas in 2019. Lewis Hamilton, though, despite Mercedes being the most successful team here in Baku in the only, the 5 races we've had here, Lewis only has 2 podium finishes in 5 races in Baku. And if you look at, how the Mercedes car was on pace for those particular weekends, yeah, it's not always been a clean, clear, trouble-free weekend for him in Baku. I mean, 2016, of course, he hit the wall in qualifying and he had to come back through some of the field, and he didn't really make his way through and only finished in 5th, even though Mercedes were miles ahead of the rest of the pack on pace that weekend. Obviously, 2017, he was very unlucky. He was going to win that race. Mercedes were very quick that weekend. And then 2018, he did win, even though it was in very fortunate circumstances. And then 2019 was beat fair and square by Bottas. But last year, of course, he made a massive error at the very end of the race, which cost him the win and the World Championship as well. So, yeah, it's not been a great Grand Prix, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in Baku. For his teammate, though, George Russell, it's not been too bad this Grand Prix in the past. I think last year he had a decent qualifying result. Can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm pretty sure he got into Q2. Might be wrong on that, but pretty sure he did. Not too bad. But in 2018... Russell did win here in F2, so yeah, Russell does also have good history himself in Baku when it comes to his own driving. So hopefully he can be competitive, and hopefully Lewis Hamilton can be too, and have a clean and simple enough weekend in the Mercedes car. Now we'll go on to the McLaren team. And I will, by the way, guys, come to you in the chat in a moment. Just going to get through McLaren and then we'll come to you guys in a moment. But with McLaren, they come into this weekend off the back of 2 pretty good results for them. In Spain, Norris finishing 8th with a pretty sore throat in that Grand Prix. And even came out and said in the news in the last couple of days that he couldn't even drink the water during the race from his water bottle because of the tonsillitis being that bad. And obviously it was a very hot Grand Prix, so probably suffered a lot with dehydration through that Grand Prix and certainly Grand Prix weekend. And then in Monaco, he did also have a bit of an illness there as well. But it was a great weekend for him. 5th in qualifying, 6th in the race, and definitely Norris really helping the team to where they are at the moment, which is 4th in the championship, and that has to be the aim now for McLaren this season. It's not been that great of a season, I have to say, for McLaren. Definitely quite a bit away from where I expected them and hoped they would be for the season. I thought they would be maybe not the quickest team this year, but I thought they would be in that fight with Ferrari, Red Bull. And given the troubles Mercedes had, I think McLaren should be disappointed that they weren't taking advantage of that properly and outscoring them on a consistent basis, at least up until the Spanish Grand Prix. So, yeah, not been the greatest season so far for McLaren, but they are still 4th in the championship, which is not that bad considering the troubled season they've had so far. And they've definitely made a lot of improvements to this car Coming into this weekend, though, because of the long straight here in Baku and a couple other straights as well, might not be as successful this Grand Prix as it was, the result in Monaco or in Spain, because obviously the layouts there definitely helped with McLaren's lack of straight line speed, which they still have quite a lot of in terms of a lack of. McLaren, I don't expect this weekend to be that competitive. Daniel Ricciardo, even though Ricciardo won the race here in 2017, Ricciardo has not been... I mean, he's been quick here in a couple races here in the past, but his history isn't that great in Baku. I mean, 2016, he had a pretty poor race result after his qualifying result, which I don't think was necessarily down to himself, but that was still the case. 2017, I mean, that weekend was going to be a poor weekend, really, up until the craziness started to happen, and of course, he took full advantage of it. And then 2018, obviously crashed with his teammate. 2019... retired after crashing with Kvyat, and then last year had a pretty disappointing qualifying result, I remember, 12th or 13th. He did come through in the race, though, I think, to finish in 7th or something like that. So it wasn't too bad of a race for him, but, if you look at Fernando Norris as well, it's not been an amazing Grand Prix normally for the two drivers, in terms of consistently, if you know what I mean. It's not a consistently great race for them, even though Ricciardo, like I said, has had good history here in the past with that win, but all the other races have not been that good. And then obviously Norris, he's had a couple points finishes here. Norris, 7th, I think, or 8th, I think, in 2019, and then last year I think he finished in 5th place, I think it was, McLaren, so not too bad of a result, but his pace during those Grand Prix were not exactly anything amazing. So, yeah, the two drivers, not great history around Baku. And McLaren, if you look at where their car is strong and where it's weak, it shouldn't be anywhere near really as strong here as it was in Monaco. If they are still appearing at the bottom of the speed trap charts, I expect McLaren to be, at best, probably getting Norris just about into the top 10, but I think they're going to struggle a lot to get some decent points out of this weekend, because obviously Ferrari, Red Bull will be the two most competitive teams. Mercedes will definitely be more competitive because their straight line speed definitely has been improved by them cutting the drag off their car from a few races ago. Alfa Romeo have better straight line speed, and I think they'll return to form this weekend. Alpine have definitely better straight line speed. Alpha Tauri have better straight line speed, and last couple races, the last race in Monaco, they were pretty competitive, and they still have some decent pace in that car, do Alpha Tauri. So I think it's going to be pretty tough for McLaren to get a decent points finish out of this weekend. I mean, they can do it, but it's definitely not going to be anywhere near what we saw in Monaco, a top 6 finish with Lando Norris. At best, I think Norris gets like a 9th or a 10th, and then Ricciardo most likely will be worse than that. Daniel Ricciardo, of course, at the moment, not performing well. And really, since the Miami Grand Prix, has just kind of returned to what he was doing this time last year, which was very, very poor, which of course is very disappointing. So hopefully we see something better from him. But yeah, I don't expect McLaren to be that competitive. And if you are a McLaren fan, then I wouldn't be coming into this weekend with too many expectations, because like I said, that lack of straight line speed is going to hurt them a lot, unless they can try and manufacture a tow somehow to help, say, Lando Norris in qualifying or something like that. But yeah, it's going to be a pretty tough weekend for McLaren. But we'll quickly go back to these pictures of the Ferrari, and I'll switch to probably the Red Bull pictures in a moment. I'm going to come to you guys now in the chat to see what you guys have to say. Let me know what you think of the top 4 teams, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, coming into this weekend. And let me know in the chat and the comment section as well, if you're watching this after the stream is finished. Let me know for all those teams and drivers, how do you think they'll do this weekend? And, what will their competitiveness be like this weekend? And for the teams, let me know pace-wise, where do you think they'll be at this weekend? And whether you think I'm right, I'm wrong. Like I said, let me know in the chat. As well, if you are new to the channel, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because of course this weekend there'll be lots of content on this channel regarding the 2022 Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend. I will get into my full schedule for between now and Monday at the end of this stream, but I will let you know quickly what the plan is for tomorrow. So tomorrow I'll be live 3 times. Firstly at 11:45 AM UK time for the Practice 1 watch along, then live again for the Practice 2 watch along at 2:45 PM UK time, and then live later that evening at 8 PM UK time to preview qualifying for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where of course we'll look at practice, the data, everything that happened, and give, our best predictions, I guess, going into qualifying on Saturday. So that's the plan for tomorrow. So if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to the channel by clicking subscribe on the bottom right of the screen. Don't forget as well to smash the like button and share this video and channel every way you can. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. By the way, as well, if you want to know my full schedule now, just go to my community tab on my homepage and go to the second post down, and you'll see the full schedule for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday as well. But let's see what you guys are saying in chat. Good evening, by the way, to everyone, or good afternoon, good morning, wherever to everyone. Obviously, depends on what time it is in your part of the world. Let's see. I'll find some good comments here. Rooksfoot, obviously my main moderator in chat in terms of, he's in the chat the most out of everyone. Maybe controversial, he says, opinion to some, but I believe Norris is just as good as Russell. He is Mr. Consistent, best of the rest. Russell outperformed a crap car and amazed in his first chance of a top car. I mean, with Norris, let me just go back to McLaren. There you go. Kind of got him back on the screen there. With Norris, I mean, Lando, I believe Russell is better than Lando. I just believe he's got more pace than Lando has. Lando, though, is definitely competitive with Russell. If they were teammates, they would be very close to each other every weekend. It would ebb and flow. Lando would definitely beat him at some races. There's no doubt about that. I just think ultimately Russell would be the majority of the time ahead of Lando Norris. But they would be very competitive with each other. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, Norris's consistency, if they were to, say, fight for a championship together, that would definitely bode well for Lando. And that's a big reason why Lando last season was so competitive and so good, was because he was consistently finishing in the top 5, top 6 of races, which is why he was one of the drivers of the season last year. Rooksfoot says, but do you think Norris would have been any different? I can't quite work out who would win in a title fight in top cars, but Norris is right up there, says Rooksfoot. I mean, if you put all the top young drivers that we have in F1, obviously Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell, Norris, Gasly, maybe you put an Ocon, in there, those main younger drivers, who would be the best? I think it would be Max Verstappen as the number 1. And then for number 2, I think it would be a very close fight between Russell, Leclerc, Norris, possibly Gasly as well. But definitely, I think Leclerc, Russell, Norris, in terms of their own pace, they would be very, very close to one another. But I still think out of that young core, and I guess the new generation that's going to take over from, your Hamiltons, obviously Raikkonen's already retired, your Alonso's, Vettel's, that generation, and even to a degree, Perez's. Yeah, this generation of Verstappen, Leclerc, I guess you could put Sainz in there as well. Russell, Norris, Gasly, Ocon. Out of that generation, I think Max Verstappen is definitely the best. Again, drivers like Leclerc, Russell, and Norris, I think definitely would give Max a run for his money. But I just think Max is too good. He's just got too much speed, and is just too talented in the areas you need to be, very talented in. Obviously, overtaking, he is incredibly good at overtaking. It's very hard to overtake him. Sometimes for the not most legal reasons, but it is very hard to overtake him. He's improved massively on his qualifying. He's improved his consistency when it comes to qualifying and his general speed over a single lap. He's always been very competitive in the races. He does tend to also not really wear out his tyres too much and still be pretty quick. So I just think Max is just too good in all of the important areas. And then with, your Leclercs, Russells, and Norrises, I mean, they're good in some of those areas, but not all of them. Or they're good in all of them, but they're not as good as Max is. So we'll see. McLaren F1 race says it's a shame Alex Alban hasn't got a home race. Bariam, I think it says there in chat, is a MotoGP circuit fairly close to Bangkok. Wouldn't take much to get it to F1 spec. I'm married to a Thai, so a race there would be wicked. I mean, it's definitely an option if F1 wants to expand even further in Asia, but to be honest, I think F1's already tried the expansion in Asia, which it did quite a bit from the late 90s into the early to mid 2000s, obviously, where F1, brought on board the Malaysian Grand Prix, then the Chinese Grand Prix, then the Korean Grand Prix, and now look, you've got, Malaysia's gone, Korea's gone, China will be back when they can get COVID under control, and then obviously Suzuka's been on the calendar since the late 1980s, and that's not going anywhere because everyone loves it. But yeah, to me it feels like F1's kind of done with Asia in a way, which is a bit sad because there is a lot of motorsport fans in that part of the world, but it feels like F1 is now looking to other places to expand, Africa, which they should definitely look at expanding. Obviously America, they are starting as well to probably pull away from South America, our F1. So, I mean, what are the chances of a Thailand Grand Prix? Not great. I mean, we were going to get a Vietnam Grand Prix until it turned out, well, obviously COVID hit, and then it turned out that the person behind it was a scammer, I'm pretty sure. So that didn't help when it came to expanding or, finding new places in Asia. But yeah, I don't think a Thailand Grand Prix is it is realistic. I mean, it could happen. It could happen. I mean, if they can offer up enough money and present a good enough circuit, then it can happen. But I just don't think that it's realistic given where F1 is expanding or, the direction that they're heading. Let me look in the chat to find some other comments. Any upgrades from the teams this weekend? Chazza asks, McLaren F1 race. I mean, we'll find out more tomorrow, the exact upgrades. I know Ferrari have brought, I think, new wing mirrors, or a slight upgrade to that. But I don't expect there to be really any upgrades at this Grand Prix. I think the next batch of upgrades you'll really see from the teams will be at Silverstone, because, of course, so many teams are based so close to Silverstone. So, yeah. Paul James Squibbs asks, what do you think of drivers using their platform to raise awareness for issues that interest them? Apparently the FIA guy, Ben Solomon, I can't remember his name now you've said that. Is it Ben Sulayem? I think it is. Hates it. Is he right? He specifically singled out Norris, Vettel, and Hamilton. I mean, this issue of and I'll put Hamilton on the screen because obviously he's someone who's probably the most prominent or one of the most prominent in doing that. This issue has come up in the last few years. Obviously, drivers using their platforms to raise awareness in certain areas. I mean, I don't have a problem with it as long as they're not trying to influence like politics or political parties or the democratic process. Then I don't really mind them doing it at all, as long as they're not trying to. I mean, when I say influence the democratic process, I don't mean like getting involved in politics and possibly becoming a politician. That's fine. I mean, like, as in, you know, in a sense, like lobbying, which I don't think lobbying is necessarily a bad thing, but I think in certain cases, the way you do lobbying can be bad. You know, as long as they're not, I guess, engaging in the actual political system in a bad way, in trying to raise awareness or push the issues they care about, then I think what they're doing is absolutely fine. I mean, I don't want to go too much into the FIA president because, I mean, I don't know what his beliefs are when it comes to certain issues like, you know, race and religion and the economy and all, you know, multitude of issues. But, you know, I have no problem with it. I have absolutely no problem with it. I mean, it's something that probably I would do if I got into their position and I had a platform. I would probably, if there was an issue I cared about enough to talk about and raise awareness for, I would absolutely do it. I know some people are like, oh, but, you know, leave it at home or, you know, leave it away from the track because you know, we should keep these things away from the races and all. I disagree. I disagree. Because at the end of the day, people, and certainly these drivers, I know they may seem like they're not normal people. I mean, obviously, they're not normal people because they are much, you know, richer than us and they live completely different lives to us. But they are, you know, human beings as well. And they do have things that they want to raise awareness for and, you know, messages they want to push. And I don't see, you know, what the problem with it, what the problem is with that. I just don't see what the problem is. I mean, the only other problem I can think of that I would probably disagree is not just the first problem, which I said is, you know, influencing the democratic process in a negative way. The only other thing I think that could be a bad thing is if they are, you know, pushing those messages out there, but they're not really as passionate about the messages they push out there as they maybe seem. But I think the F1 drivers that certainly are promoting certain messages or viewpoints, I think they're, you know, pretty passionate about those things. I don't think they're just saying it to be, you know, to fit in with the crowd or anything, but yeah, I don't see a problem with it. Don't see a problem with it at all. Obviously, you know, there was lots of there was opposition to the taking the knee in 2020 and 2021, which make of that what you will. But you know, if drivers want to do that, then they can. I don't see the problem with it. I mean, I'm not going to personally pay attention to it because it's just not that. You know, that's not why I watch Formula One. I watch Formula One obviously to watch the actual race or qualifying or practice session itself. I don't watch it for anything else really. So yeah, doesn't interest me particularly. But let me just find some of the comments because I think there's a couple more in chat. About this. Also, Paul James Squibb says, haha, the FIA chap started it. I didn't even know Norris was an ambassador for mental health issues until the FIA fella complained about it. Why? I don't understand why you would complain about Lando Norris being an ambassador for, you know, for like mental health treatment. Like, why? How is that a bad thing? I just don't get it. I mean, the people who complain about that are just completely ignorant to the issue. Let's find some other comments here if I can. Hello, by the way, to Music Monster Man in chat. Someone in chat saying Norris has never driven a truly good car in comparison with the rest of the grid. True to a certain extent, yeah, he hasn't. I mean, compared to like Leclerc and Verstappen, definitely hasn't had a car that's been as representative, or has been, you know, it hasn't been as competitive as theirs to the point where we can make serious comparisons. I mean, 2020 and 2021, of course, Norris and Leclerc were kind of fighting, or they pretty much were fighting in the similar parts of the field, but yeah, it's still hard to predict. Well, not to predict, but, you know, still hard to to come up with a final opinion as to who is the better driver. And it pretty much is for the whole field. It's hard to say exactly where F1 is in terms of the best drivers and the worst drivers in Formula 1 because of the car differences, and that's always been it's always been that way. But I think I'll now move on and get to the rest of teams. Let's now go on to Alpine, who had a pretty good Grand Prix in Monaco. Fernando Alonso had a pretty good weekend, except for his crash at the end of Q3. And yeah, finished in 7th. Could have been better if he not had, crashed. And then obviously there wasn't, if there wasn't that other crash at the end of qualifying with Perez and Sainz that caused the red flag, then it could have been better for him. Could have been a 5th place or a 6th place. But yeah, good result for Alpine. I personally was not expecting them to be that competitive in Monaco. I thought they'd be probably on the fringes of the top 10, but yeah, very good result. Very important result as well, because they need to try and keep pace with McLaren, who I think definitely are their main rivals for this season. And I think coming into this weekend, because McLaren's performance will drop off, I think Alpine are going to have a good weekend. As we've seen this season, in a straight line, pretty quick. And if you look at the speed trap data from all the qualifying and race, sessions so far this season, you'll see that Alpine are pretty competitive, and certainly more competitive than McLaren in a straight line. And of course, that will be a very important factor in the final sector, and to a degree in the first sector here in Baku as well. And yeah, I think Alpine, if you look at the last 2 races, 2 or 3 races actually, Alpine have done pretty well, despite not having great expectations going into those particular races. I mean, in Miami, they did probably the best they could do. Esteban Ocon finished in, was it 8th place in the race when he started from the back? Alonso disappointingly fell out the points because of a penalty, but he still, I think, did a good job that weekend and did on track, I think, finish in 8th, but obviously it swapped around at the end because he got his penalty. And then he got another penalty, didn't he, actually, for jumping the chicane. So 2 penalties there. And then obviously in Spain, they got 7th and 9th. Very good result for them in that Grand Prix. And then in Monaco, got a bit of a surprise result in 7th. And obviously Ocon finished 9th on track, but had a penalty for his clash with Lewis Hamilton, that penalty was just wrong, completely wrong, because he didn't deserve a penalty for what happened. Oh no, he did deserve a penalty. What am I on about? I'm just trying to remember what incident it was. It was the turn 1 crash, not the one against the wall. Yeah, that's the wrong opinion from me. I think that was what my original opinion was, but I changed it because I viewed some more angles of the actual accident itself, and yeah, he was definitely at fault for that, because I think Lewis was halfway alongside him into turn 1 and he just, turned in. And by the way, just to remind people, if anyone out there says that wasn't what you got a penalty for, it was. If you go back and look at the race director notes, it was for that accident we saw on the TV broadcast during the live race itself. So yeah, that's what he got a penalty for. And yeah, he did deserve, not he didn't deserve, he did deserve that penalty. But, on track, he got a 9th place. So Alpine, if it wasn't for a couple penalties here or there, they'd be 5th in the championship, and they would be, what, 14 or 15, around 15 points behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, which is, not that much of a gap. I mean, obviously, at the minute, it's only 19 points, and they can definitely gain some ground on McLaren, and I think they'll be more competitive than McLaren this weekend. Esteban Ocon, in the past here, has done pretty well. Like I said, in 2017, he was probably heading for a podium if he didn't smash his teammate into the wall. Obviously, his teammate being Sergio Perez that year. And then 2018, he qualified in 7th place, and he got took out by Kimi Räikkönen on the first lap when he was up to like 5th or 6th after that first couple corners of that race. So Ocon does have good pace around here. We've seen it in the past. And for Fernando Alonso, Alonso's not been great in qualifying here in the past, but in the races has produced some amazing performances. Certainly 2018, where he had a very broken car after the first lap or so there, where I think he had like 2 different punctures on his car and his floor was pretty damaged. And he still came through and finished, I think, 7th in that race. Obviously, a safety car coming out towards the end helped him massively with that. And then last year, he did amazingly well as well. Not a great qualifying, but then finished 6th because he went on the soft tyres on the restart, I think, of that Grand Prix. So, yeah, brilliant result from Fernando last year at this Grand Prix. And, yeah, I think given the 2 drivers pretty good around this track, and the Alpine car should be, I think, well suited to this track, I think they'll be competitive this weekend, and they'll be one of the main midfield contenders. And I reckon if Mercedes are struggling a bit more than I thought or think they will in the slow speed corners, Alpine might be able to cause a surprise and be right there with Mercedes, if not be ahead of them. There is a possibility of that if Alpine can really, get the most out of what they've got for this weekend. I think there's definitely a possibility of that. So I'd say coming into this Grand Prix, I'd say the aim has got to be for Alpine outscore McLaren. I think that's got to be the aim really for the next few races. But I think this weekend they've definitely got a very, very good chance of that. Have the French team. Now let's move on to Alfa Romeo. And as you can see on screen, this is their special livery for this weekend. That Alfa Romeo are going for the green, white, and red. Of course, that is the Italian flag colours. Don't actually know what the special occasion is, sorry to say. But yeah, a decent livery that they're going for this weekend's Grand Prix. And hopefully it will spur them on to a better performance than what we saw in Monaco. In Monaco, they were the biggest surprise in terms of their performance. The result, in the end, wasn't actually too bad. Valtteri Bottas finished in 9th for the Alfa Romeo team. Still a pretty good result considering they didn't have that much pace, really, through the weekend. But we thought they would be the most competitive midfield team because of what they looked like in Barcelona and even Miami as well. We thought they'd be very, very quick, but just simply didn't turn out to be that quick. I mean, even Valtteri Bottas, I think, came out after qualifying and said that he was surprised how slow they were and thought they'd be very quick in Monaco. So I think just a surprise all round. Everyone's surprised, even the team themselves, by the lack of performance. I think this weekend, though, they will be better. I mean, the Ferrari PU is one of the strongest on the grid, so that should help them in comparison to, say, McLaren, who, of course, are still struggling with their straight line speed. Also, teams like, Aston Martin, who are still struggling in that aspect when it comes to straight line speed. And also, because of their performance in the corners, which is still pretty good. I mean, in Monaco, yeah, they weren't that great. Maybe they just don't have that much mechanical grip compared to other teams. But, and obviously mechanical grip in Monaco, very important. But, they still have a fundamentally good car and a very good base for what they, a good base of a car for this season. So I think they can absolutely bounce back this weekend. I think there is a very good chance of that. And if they were to bounce back to what we saw in, in Monaco, not in Monaco, in Barcelona or in Miami, I wouldn't be that surprised by it. I think Valtteri Bottas definitely will be in the top 10 in qualifying on the race this weekend. Obviously, won here in 2019, should have won in 2018, came from the back to finish second in 2017. Yes, safety cars did help with that, but great performance nonetheless. And I even think in 2016 for Williams, he finished sixth, I think, for that race in a Williams car that was not that competitive that season, or certainly not as competitive as it was in years past. So it's always been a good track for Valtteri, and definitely he has been one of the better performing drivers around Baku. Last year was very poor for him. That was down to the Mercedes car, his Mercedes car being set up quite a bit differently than Lewis Hamilton, but Valtteri definitely was very poor in that Grand Prix weekend. But hopefully we will not see a repeat of that. He does seem to be a lot happier in the Alfa Romeo than he was in last year's Mercedes car, so I'm pretty sure Bottas will be competitive. Hopefully Zhou Guanyu as well. He does need to start improving his performances to help Alfa Romeo possibly finish fourth in the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, if Bottas can finish in the top 7 or 8 in this Grand Prix this weekend, that would be a pretty good result for the Alfa Romeo team. That's really what they need. Now, going on to RSF1, and even though they've not been too bad in the last 2 or 3 races, despite not really bringing that many upgrades to the car, and obviously in Spain, we saw the news that they didn't bring any upgrades to the car, and they won't be bringing any until the French Grand Prix, I believe, in the late part of July. So, not really developing this car at the moment are the Haas F1 team. Their pace has not been too bad still. Obviously in Barcelona, they had a double Q3 appearance. In Monaco, pace wasn't too bad for the first half of the race when they were still in the race, but obviously they fell out of the race very quickly. Kevin Magnussen had a problem with his car. Then obviously Mick Schumacher almost split his car. Bloody, why am I saying it like that? His car in half. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah, very, very poor ending to their Monaco Grand Prix. Mick Schumacher at the moment is starting to feel the heat. I think we can absolutely say that now. He is really starting to feel the heat from the media, which, to be honest, I mean, the media can be definitely excessive with how they cover drivers, and can be a bit too they can praise drivers a bit too much for what they deserve, and they can definitely overly criticize drivers and make them or at least portray them to the public as performing a lot worse than they actually are. But Mick Schumacher definitely in the last couple of weeks is starting to see some questions being raised and some criticism heading his way. And I think it is absolutely right that that is happening. I mean, I don't know the exact degrees of criticism he's getting, because I've not read all the articles about him, but we have to just admit, if you are, fair and objective, you have to admit this. Mick Schumacher has not been good enough so far this season. He just hasn't. He's had the chances to finish in the points, and he's failed. Obviously, Bahrain, Imola, Miami, Spain. Spain was also a bit to do with the team as well, because the team didn't put him on the best strategy, but you have to put himself in that as well, because it's a team effort. And obviously Monaco, massive crash. Saudi Arabia qualifying, massive crash. And obviously with the budget cap now, that's a lot of money taken away from the Haas team that they would have needed for possible development of certain parts. So I think it's definitely right that people start asking questions as to his performances, and even whether he's good enough to be in Formula One with Mick Schumacher. I mean, Sebastian Vettel has come out and said that they need to ease off on Mick Schumacher. I mean, if they are going too hard on him, yes, but I think, mild criticism, I think, is fine of what he's done so far, because I think Mick has been one of the worst performing drivers this season. I think you could probably say he's not been the worst. There's other drivers that would definitely be, say, like a Latifi, or possible a Zhou Guanyu, who you could put up there as one of the worst performing drivers this season. But you'd have to put Mick Schumacher in that category as well. just has not been good enough. Kevin Magnussen has absolutely destroyed him this season. Obviously, in qualifying, he's been, I think, mostly or consistently ahead of Mick Schumacher has Kevin. Obviously, way ahead of him in the championship. Mick is 19th in the Drivers' Championship, and Kevin is 10th on 15 points. So it's just not good enough. And if Haas are going to do anything in the Constructors' Championship, which could be considered successful, Mick has got to step up his performances. I mean, I did give him a bit of a break for the first 2 or 3 races because, you know, the first 2 or 3 races with some drivers, we can see them not quite get to grips straight away with their new machinery. But for the last 2-3 races, I really think he's been, you know, excessively poor and should have been doing a lot better. I mean, Miami obviously threw away a great chance of probably an 8th place there, or definitely at least a 9th place in that Grand Prix. Spain was looking competitive. Like I said, the team did not help him on strategy, but his pace was not that good. And obviously in Monaco, poor qualifying and a really big accident, which doesn't help the team financially. So we'll see if he can step up this weekend. Obviously, he's raced here in Baku before in 2019, but I don't expect him to be that competitive this weekend, to be honest. And for Haas, overall, I don't think they'll be that competitive. Kevin Magnussen, if you look at his performances here from the past, I mean, he got a very good result here in 2017 was it a 6th or a 7th for Magnussen that year? In 2017, he was very good in that race for the Haas team at the time. But I can't remember any other races in Baku where Magnussen was particularly great. So as a team, I'd expect them to be firmly out of the points. Maybe they'll nick a point if something happens in terms of, you know, a few of the top drivers, you know, drop out. But I don't see it being that competitive of a weekend. But for Mick, hopefully we see a consistent weekend where he can out-qualify and out-race Kevin Magnussen and not make any big, important mistakes. And certainly, please do not smash it into the wall again and cost your team another, few thousand or tens of thousands of dollars, because it's going to really affect them to come or coming up, you know, later in the season. The thing is, though, with Mick, I think really maybe not this race and the next race. Obviously, the Canadian Grand Prix, he's never raced around that track, I don't believe. But the races coming up in July, Silverstone, Red Bull Ring, Paul Ricard, Hungaroring, if he continues these performances there, then, yeah, the team have got to start asking some serious questions about what do they do with that seat for the future, because they can't afford to have poorly performing drivers, I'm afraid. Anyway, let's move on to AlphaTauri. Disappointing in Monaco for them. Gasly, it's such a shame what happened to him, you know, getting not released in time to do his final lap in Q1 and end up qualifying in 17th place. Because if he had done his final lap and got through to Q2, which I think he would have, Pierre probably would have finished firmly in the points in Monaco, because he was in the top 7 consistently in practice. And yeah, had a very good weekend up until that point. And in the race, I have to say, his performance in the race was very, very good. You go from 17th up to 11th. And yeah, I thought he did very good as well on the intermediate tyres, cutting his way through a few drivers to get up the field. It's actually quite sad he didn't benefit from more, from that decision that AlphaTauri took to go onto the intermediate tyres, because his pace was very, very good, especially in those first few laps. Even though the track was still quite wet, his pace was very, very good on the intermediate tyres, especially, of course, in clear air. But coming into this weekend, I think AlphaTauri will probably maintain that competitiveness. Hopefully, Yuki Tsunoda does not fall off in the race like he did in Monaco. But yeah, I think they'll be competitive this weekend. Tsunoda as well, I think, finished in the points here last year as well as Gasly did. So, yeah, Tsunoda and Gasly, I don't think have a reason to be off the pace this weekend. And obviously Pierre Gasly at last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix finished third. A fantastic drive, fantastic result. Of course, though, he was performing a lot better last year, and AlphaTauri were a lot quicker last year. I think he qualified fourth on the grid, if I'm not mistaken, or fifth. It was fourth or fifth on the grid he was for the Grand Prix last year. An amazing result he got in the AlphaTauri. Obviously, an even better race result. But they will be competitive for sure with, Alpine, McLaren, maybe Mercedes as well, if Mercedes are struggling a bit, which is definitely possible with all the bumps and that here in Baku. But yeah, watch out for AlphaTauri, because you never know what could happen. And they could get a surprise, good result out of this weekend. I'm hoping, though, this man on screen, Yuki Tsunoda, can, obviously be in the points, but can, be a bit more competitive with Gasly than he was in Monaco. Because in Monaco, Gasly has always been very quick in Monaco, but I thought Tsunoda was a bit too far off the pace considering what he's been like compared to Gasly so far this season. So I think hopefully the AlphaTauri team, I think, would hope that Tsunoda could at least put it in the top 10. If they are, that is, as competitive as they think they will be. Now, let's get on to the final couple teams. Aston Martin, the next team. Pretty good last couple races for Aston Martin. Sebastian Vettel is, I have to say, I think is going down at the minute as one of the most underrated drivers of the season so far. Obviously, since he came back to Aston Martin after missing the first two races, I think he's done very, very well. Imola, he was fantastic there to get the results he did. What was it, 8th? I think he got in the race there, or 9th. I know it was a points finish, and it was an amazing result he got in the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Miami was heading for an 8th place there before his good friend Mick Schumacher took him out. And then obviously Spain finished 11th, and then Monaco finished in 10th. So Sebastian really, to me, seems to be back to his absolute best form from his, from years past, which is great to see. And we know that Sebastian Vettel is historically very competitive around the streets of Baku. And we know actually as well that Aston Martin, who of course previously were Racing Point and Force India, have been pretty competitive here since we started racing in 2016. Here are the stats. So since the first race for F1 in Baku, Force India / Racing Point / Aston Martin overall have had 3 podiums in 5 races in Baku. They're actually one of the most, top 3 or 4 most successful teams in Baku when it comes to race results. A very, very good record they do have. So watch out for them this weekend. You never know, could get another great result. And Sebastian Vettel, definitely you need to watch out for him this weekend, because he has 3 podiums in 5 races here in Baku and had pole position here in 2018. The only people to have pole position in Baku since we started racing here in 2016 were obviously Rosberg, Hamilton, Vettel, Bottas, and then Leclerc. So we've not had, someone get 2 pole positions in Baku. It's only been 1 of each for the different drivers. So we'll see what happens when it comes to that in qualifying. But yeah, Sebastian Vettel and the Aston Martin, or previously Force India team, very good history here in Baku. Characteristically, this track should not suit their car, to be honest, because they are still struggling for top-end speed. But despite that, they've been pretty competitive in the last 3 or 4 races. So they could still get a points finish. And definitely with Sebastian Vettel, who, like I said, looks to be back to his best. You never know what they could do. And finally, we'll go to Williams. And yeah, Williams, easily the slowest team right now in F1. There's no doubt about that. And the only way they are going to get a point is, of course, if we get a 2017 or 2018 or 2021 like Grand Prix, which could happen. It's possible here in Baku. But yeah, they definitely don't have the pace to be finishing the points, I don't think, this weekend. Alex Alban, he's only done one race here in F1 in 2019, and he didn't do too bad. He qualified, I think, 10th or 11th, or he finished 10th or 11th in the race. I can't remember exactly, but he didn't do that bad. And I think, actually, he won here in F2. I think he won the sprint race here in F2 in 2018. So he does have good history himself here in Baku, does Alban. But Williams are just that slow. I just don't think Alban can really pull that team up the grid far enough to be competitive enough on pace to be a point-scoring team. But go back to the top teams here, and I'll come back to you guys now in the live chat. Yeah, like I said previously, make sure to keep your comments coming in the chat, and I'll make sure to read out as many as I can regarding, this weekend and what's going to happen for the teams. So let's just quickly read out some more. McLaren F1 race says, looks like it's a bit windy in Baku, Chazza, this weekend and fairly hot. That may affect certain teams with rear wing share, I think it says. Yeah, it could. Or shear, I think you're saying, not share. Yeah. And we've seen, and I mentioned it right at the start of this stream with, I remember with Nico Hülkenberg at exit of turn 5. I think the wind that year, I think pushed him into the wall at that particular corner, even though it's well sheltered, that part of the track to a certain degree. So yeah, wind definitely has always been a factor here in Baku. And I remember that weekend in 2018, it was very cold as well. But if it is a hot weekend, then it might not be, quite as bad as that particular weekend in 2018. Tonka says 20 mile an hour winds are no joke, but it may die down by Sunday. Yeah, we'll have to say. I mean, if it's 20 mile an hour for the whole weekend, then yeah, that's going to be some serious wind that could affect performance this weekend. Santiago asks, Alonso podium? No, I don't think that's possible, really. Unless, obviously, we get, safety cars and a few people retired from the race. McLaren F1 race says, I've never been a Mick fan in the seat, but as a person, nice bloke, and before trolls come out, I do not care who his dad is. I mean, yeah, I've never been a massive fan of Mick in terms of his, his career. I mean, I like him. He's definitely talented. There's no doubt about that. And he is, from what I've seen of him so far, he is good enough for Formula One. It's just, at the minute, in this first batch of the season so far, he hasn't performed well enough. So, we hope he improves. And I think I have to stress that, and I think we as a community have to stress that as well, is we're not wishing because of who his dad is that he doesn't do well. I think everyone wants him to do well. I think most people in the community, F1 community, want him to do well enough so he can go to Ferrari and possibly win a race so we can all cry. So, yeah, I think, there's not people, I don't think there is people out there necessarily hating on Mick, but I think we need to call it, when we see bad performances, I think we need to call it, when we see it. Let's find a couple more comments quick. Ottomayo Parker, I think it is in chat, says they talk of a salary cap for drivers. Could we get an age cap as well? Maybe making more room for drivers like Oscar Piastri. I don't think some drivers deserve a seat just because of experience. I like Alonso and Vettel, but seriously, he says. I mean, I could see that getting support, a cap on how old you can be before you have to retire, but I personally would not do it. I disagree with that, but I don't think you're the only person who thinks that could be an idea. I don't think that's a wild idea, put it that way, that you've just put out there. But the reason I disagree with it is because I think as long as you are competitive enough and fit enough to participate in the series, then I think you should be allowed to. It's kind of the same in other sports as well, in like football, for any Americans out there, soccer. As long as you're, again, good enough, fit enough to compete, then you should be allowed to compete as long as you want. And same with tennis. So I don't have a problem with it. I mean, it would definitely help drivers like Oscar Piastri and other drivers we've seen in the past. Obviously, Callum Ilot's another one who could have probably got an F1 seat if there was a rule like that. But yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. But we do need there is a way, or we need to find a way rather to get, people who do well, for example, in F2, and certainly drivers who win the F2 championship. We have to try and find a way to get them on the grid easier, because it devalues Formula 2 if the champion of Formula 2 can't even get a seat. I mean, obviously, the quality of the F1 grid does, it's a big reason behind that, because the quality of the F1 grid now is probably the best we've ever seen in its history. But, if an F2 driver can't get on the grid when literally the point of F2 is to do well enough to then get to F1, then, then it kind of devalues F2 and makes it a bit, the higher the stakes are lower rather than higher, I guess you could say. Because obviously, if the drivers racing in that series think there's an opportunity to get to F1 and there is seats available, then it's going to increase the competition in F2. But if these type of situations happen, then it's not going to help. There are rumours though that Oscar Piastri is going to be driving for Williams next year, replacing Nicholas Latifi. I do hope that's the case. I mean, I hope he's on the grid, period, because he is good enough. There is no doubt about it. He's probably the best driver we've had in F2 since, George Russell, Lando Norris in 2018? And yeah, I would say better than Mick Schumacher, because, I mean, Mick obviously was good, but he didn't dominate the series, or, wasn't as consistently good as Oscar was last year. So, yeah, I think Piastri definitely is good enough for Formula 1. I mean, it is a shame that we won't be able to see him if he does make his debut at Williams. It is a shame we won't be able to see him at the Alpine team. But at the end of the day, Ocon and Alonso are doing well enough in that team, and there's no reason for Alpine to drop Alonso or Ocon, because as a team, they're doing brilliantly. And I think Alpine have a great chance this season of finishing 4th in the championship. They cap a minimum age, so if they are young enough to compete, they should, ? Asks Ottomeyer Parker. Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've made, I think after Verstappen, it's basically the Verstappen rule that you have to be a certain age, I think, to get into Formula 1, which I do agree to a certain extent that there should be, starting, there should be an age where, you have to be at least this age to be considered to compete. But that's the same in, football or tennis or sports like that, where you have to be like at least 16 to be considered for an adult competition. I think the minimum age is 18, if I'm correct, for F1. I would lower that, honestly, to 16. I know the fear after Verstappen came in at 17 was that we might get a 16-year-old and then possibly a 15-year-old. I get that, but for me, because universally, adult competition normally starts at 16 years old for sports, or, for certainly the big sports out there, I would have the minimum age be at 16. The only reason I believe in a minimum age is because I don't think having too much experience is a bad thing, but having a lack of experience is, because you want the grid to be safe. You don't want drivers on the grid who don't have the experience and are not ready. to be racing in Formula 1. So I do believe in a minimum age for F1 drivers. Who is the F2 champion? Asks Ewok. It's Oscar Piastri. And let me see if there's any other comments here I can find. Otomayo posted another comment saying, aren't being too old and too young the same. Either the senses aren't matured or the senses are diminishing. Isn't there a risk either way? I mean, there probably should at some point be like a maximum age requirement that you can't, you can't still be an F1 past a certain age, but I don't think that age should be 40, because I still think, we're seeing it with Fernando Alonso, for example, who's about that, and obviously Kimi Raikkonen last year, that even though they are old and a lot older than other drivers on the grid, they are still for their age, they're still at a very competitive high level. I think if you start getting to like 45, 50, I think that's probably where you should stop it, because reaction time obviously is slowing, and your senses aren't as good. But we've seen plenty of drivers in other motorsport series who have great success between the ages of 40 and 50, and their senses and reactions and their physique is still in great shape. So I don't think we necessarily need to be cutting it off at 35 or 40 years old, because look at Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton's what, 36, 37? Or I think it might be 37 later this year. So yeah, I think there's no problem with that. Anyway, thanks for those comments, by the way, and thank you for that comment, by the way, Otomayo especially. That was a good one. Thank you guys for coming along to this stream. And quickly, before I go, I'm just going to update you as to what my plan is again for this weekend. If you want to see it, by the way, in written form, if it's easier for you that way, then go to the community tab on my homepage of my channel and go to the second post down, and you'll see the full written plan. So this is it. So 3 streams tomorrow on Friday. First stream, practice 1 watch along at 11:45 a.m. UK time. Second stream, 2:45 p.m. UK time for the practice 2 watch along, and then 8 p.m. UK time on Friday evening, I'll be live for the qualifying preview for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Then on Saturday, there will be a difference compared to a normal Saturday. Instead of 2 streams, there'll be 3 streams. So on Saturday at 11:45 a.m. UK time, I'll be live for practice 3 for the watch along for that. Then live for the qualifying watch along at 2:30 p.m. UK time. And then at 8 p.m. UK time, I'll be live for the race preview for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The reason I'm doing the race preview on Saturday night rather than Sunday morning is because the race starts at 12 p.m. UK time. That's the start of the Grand Prix on Sunday. And normally I do my race preview on a Sunday 3 hours before the race starts. And of course, if I do that on Sunday, it'll be 9 a.m. UK time. And obviously most of my viewers are from the Western Hemisphere. So, if you're in America, that's the middle of the night that I'd be going live for you guys. And if you're, in Britain or Western Europe, that's still pretty early in the morning. So, it's just too early in the morning. And I think there's less chance of, you guys being able to catch that stream. So I'm going to do it on Saturday night instead, meaning that on Sunday there will only be 2 streams, which will be firstly, and obviously most importantly, the main event of the weekend, the race watch along for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, which will be at 11:30 a.m. UK time on Sunday morning. And then as soon as possible, about 45 minutes after the race finishes, I'll be live again for a race reaction for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And then on Monday at 8 p.m. UK time, I'll be live again to review further the events of the Grand Prix itself. Then, of course, we'll be doing the same for Canada next weekend. So a very busy next week or so, week and a half pretty much on the channel. Plenty of content coming your way. And hopefully, if you are new to the channel, you'll be able to join us. For that, bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe to the channel right there. And make sure to go to my homepage to hit the notifications bell as well. And don't forget, guys, to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget as well to join my Discord server, link below in the description, for more content like this. And it's a great place for notifications for my videos and streams. And also don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. It's in the description down below if you want to make sure what my exact @ on Twitter is. But guys, until my practice one watch along tomorrow at 11:45 AM UK time, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.